Hello there, a very good evening and welcome to another edition of Face the Nation. We've been dedicating a lot of time on Face the Nation to speak about the Prevention of Terrorism Act and the ICCPR Act. These two pieces of legislation that are meant to protect the people are of course being used in a manner that suppresses the general public. This is a public secret and many have spoken out against this. Many have promised reform. I think the reforms on the PTA have been promised since the day it was enacted. And it was initially enacted, of course, as a temporary provisions act, but it is to date being used to suppress the people. And this is something that the general public knows. This is a public secret, if you will. We've got, of course, with us today, as we always do, an expert panel to discuss these matters and everything else that's going on in Sri Lanka as well. Up first, of course, President's Counsel UR De Silva. He is an advisor to the Ministry of Justice. Of course, a lot to take out of him as to what kind of advice he's giving the Ministry of Justice these days. Thank you very much, President's Counsel UR De Silva, for joining us on our program today. We've also got Attorney at Law Javed Yusuf. He's a former member of the Constitutional Council. Thank you very much, Mr. Yusuf, for joining us on our program today. We've also got Attorney Tivanka Atiagala. Thank you very much for joining us on our program today. And we've also got Attorney at Law Hijaz Hizbullah, a man who needs no further introduction. Thank you very much for joining us on our program once again. So as we always do, Mr. De Silva, I can remember a few months back, you were seated in that exact same position. We were discussing much of the similar topics. But the reason why this has come back into the fore, if you will, is because the government took a promise and they gave an assurance that the PTA will not be used. This was, of course, before they arrested Vasantha Mudalige, the convener of the IUSF. They immediately arrested him, and now the PTA is in play again. What is the government's true stance of the PTA? Because there was this massive urge to pass the Anti-Terrorism Act, and the first draft was bought. The general public or much of the opinion was that this is worse than the PTA. Then they bought a second draft of the ATA, and now that too has faded into oblivion. All the while, the PTA is fully active and still fully in force. Your time starts now.
Thanks to Face the Nation, we discussed this matter initially when the government introduced ATA, Anti-Terrorism Act, and Justice Hizbullah, my learned friend, was also there when we were discussing, and we said there should be some sort of reforms. And because of that, I suppose, after our discussions were over, they temporarily withdrawn, and they have given the opportunity to various authorities to come forward and give their suggestions and their views. So on that basis, they have prepared a new Anti-Terrorism Act, and then they are going to produce, and it was published in September.
So this is the second draft?
Second draft, okay. That's correct. Yeah, so now it will be put it to the Parliament, and once the order, it was there in the order paper, people can go to Supreme Court, and then if they have grievances, they can inform Supreme Court. Anybody can go there. So that is the best way of expressing our views, because the Constitution itself says that anybody can go before Supreme Court and challenge this particular bill. That's, at the moment, it's a bill. So after that, the Supreme Court will convey their views to the Speaker. Thereafter, it will be debated, and then we can see the new act will come into operation after the Speaker signs.
So is the government really serious about this second draft? Do they seriously believe that this is much better and an apt replacement for the PTA?
Personally, what I suggest is, now on the face of it, people can say various things. But my personal view is that if you go to the other country laws also, you can't have a particular definition for terrorism. it says what is terrorism, and then they give a lot of examples, and then only we can, whether the people will come into that or not. The authorities will see that it is coming under that categories or not is the issue. So then because of that, the people will say this is not properly defined and various things. Most of the people, they are relying on first 2-3 sections only. But I say PTA, as you quite correctly pointed out, PTA, we have the experience in 1989, 88, 89, 90 period, where they used the confession given to the ASP or above and try to apprehend or send the people to jail. So because of that, we fought very hard, and then we showed to the country that it's a draconian law. So that is why I say it has been changed. In this particular act, that section is not there. No ASP recording a statement, and it is not going to use that. If a person is interested in giving a statement, it should be to the magistrate. Magistrate will record it, and there are provisions also to safeguard that. Then only they can use that if that is properly recorded. So likewise, there are things that had been changed from the PTA, especially the detention orders and the remanding person, keeping a person there, and the bail orders also. We will discuss later. But at the moment, what I say, we can improve that if not only myself, the others also can express their views. And on that basis, sometimes government will change to some extent to show that it is a good thing that what we are doing is, Charlotte, we must concentrate that we are concentrating on terrorism, not other people. The police will use it for some other purposes.
But the government is not at fault.
Sorry?
But the government can't be held at fault.
That's what I'm saying. So ICCPR Act also, same thing. So it's a good law, and the people, we have the experience, they are using Section 3 and put everybody into remand. So that is what I say. The law is there, but the people who are
using it don't know how to use it. Thank you very much, President's Counsel UR De Silva. We now move our attention to Attorney at Law Javed Yusuf, former member of the Constitutional Council. Mr. Yusuf, you've had a lot of experience with human rights, fundamental rights, and of course how authorities violate that of the people. Now, I think President's Counsel UR De Silva said something very interesting. He said that, you know, the law is good, but the people who enforce the law are doing it wrong. They are either misinterpreting due to want of more knowledge, or they are purposefully misusing this law to suppress the people. Is there really nothing that can do to be put as a safeguard for this? And can the government, you know, say, I'm sorry, the law is good, we passed the law, but those who use it are bad? Your time starts now.
Yeah, in response to that the people who implement the law either misuse it deliberately or otherwise, we can come to that later, but I think the first question that has to engage our minds is whether an anti-terrorism act is required. Now, the Anti-Terrorism Act or the PTA was meant to deal with extraordinary situations. But it has gone beyond that. As we know, the PTA has been in existence for maybe nearly 50 years. And it has a bad track record where it has been abused totally over the years, and we know only the high profile cases. But what about the small man, you know, whose arrest or his incarceration does not get the attention of the media and public? They suffer in silence, and then there is no remedy for them. But my point is, if you want to deal with an extraordinary situation, you don't need the PTA because there is the Public Security Act, which can be invoked at a necessary point of time.
The president doesn't need approval from parliament. He can do that on his own.
He can do it, but that is the point, that the any regulations which are brought before under the Public Security Act have to be presented to Parliament, and within 1 month it has to get approval. So there is continuous oversight, not only from the judiciary, but also from Parliament, where general tendencies, for instance, the very the thing that President's Council mentioned, like if there is a continuous abuse, these can be raised and have been raised in Parliament. So there is continuous oversight of the law that is being implemented to deal with a particular situation. And that is sufficient, because now if you look at 1971, when there was an insurrection, that was dealt with under the Public Security Act. But there were abuses. But the chances of abuses were minimized because parliamentary oversight was there. Now, if you put this either PTA or ATA or whatever, it is fixed in the statute, and then people forget about it. And then what the PTA does is, or the ATA will do, is that the police, and particularly if they are not trained in the proper way and don't have a keen sense of justice, they arrest now, investigate later. Whereas it should be the other way. You investigate. Of course, in an extraordinary situation, you may not have time. That's why you have an extraordinary law in operation.
But now, I mean, to speak just freely, what's happening in Sri Lanka, I mean, people are getting arrested for joking. People are getting arrested for joking. That's how ridiculous the situation is. So in that context, can you really, make this right?
No, that is exactly the point. Anybody can be arrested under the PTA virtually, and then later you have to take remedial measures and so on and so forth. I want to just cite one very important incident which I just saw on the TV just before I came, so I don't have all the facts, but I know DIG Nalaka Silva, head of the Terrorist Investigation Division, was arrested in 2018 when he had got a warrant for the arrest of Zahran, and he was hot on the heels of Zahran when he was arrested. And he was taken off that because he was the head of TID, and thereafter the warrant execution was forgotten. Merely on the say-so of a non-entity called Namal Kumar, who self-styled the secretary of the Dushana Virodhi Peramuna or something like that. Now imagine that they just arrested it, and if Nalaka Silva had not been arrested, and if we had pursued the warrant on Zahran, we might have a different story to tell to you. So you see, you don't know where this type of draconian legislation can have an impact. Now, normally we discuss what we say where it has impacted individuals or impacted individuals' families, because it does impact families. It's not only the individual. Families are left without a breadwinner. If they actually commit a crime, law must take its course. There is no problem about it. So that is why my view is that we don't need a anti-terrorism act. We have the Public Security Ordinance, and even the Public Security Ordinance, there could be changes in the regulations, and it has been debated in Parliament many years and years ago. Where you will, if you go through Hansard, you will see valuable contributions by Dr. Colvina de Silva, S. Nades and QC. They were analyzing the shortcomings in the regulations of the Public Security Act. But this is, that is temporary, whereas the PTA has had, the very meaning of prevention of terrorism has been turned upside down, because when the PTA was first introduced, the number of so-called terrorists you could count on your fingers. Under the PTA, terrorism bloomed, as you call it. And you know, we had a terrible civil war where many people lost their lives, limbs, and also it strained relations between communities.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Javed Yusuf. We now move our attention to the Assistant Legal Secretary of the Samagi Janabala Vegir and the organizer for Kalawana of the SJB, Attorney at Law Tivanka Artegala. Now, the SJB, of course, being in the opposition at this point of time, is always raising their voice against the ATA, against these acts that are committed under the pretext of the ATA or the ICCPR. But can you give an outright assurance to the general public that these suppressive legislation will be completely done away with without any hesitation, without any delay, at whichever time an SJB government or an SJB president is in power?
Simple answer is yes. And that's not because it's quite convenient for me to say so. It's because our leader, our party, we've always been trying to pursue these. But then again, after the COVID and then the downfall, this was not our priority. You have to get your priorities straight. Because at that time there was political turmoil. Then what happened? The economy fell, then political turmoil. So when the economy and politics fail, a country goes into chaos, which we saw. So at that time, coming back the next year in March, we never thought that the ATA will be on the plate. So that was not our focus. Our simple answer is yes, this is a temporary bill, a temporary act. And we don't want to go for another year and another year and another year.
So how hard do you think it is it really to get rid of this?
It's not that difficult. You don't sign it in for one more year. That's it. From the date of signing, it's been a temporary act. And it's been taken in, and in 22 they bring in a new amendment, like tweaking the sections here and there. 18 months brought down to 12, magistrate can visit, and all the little small twerks. Same thing is seen in the ATA, but not in the first draft. In the second draft, they bring the same amendments back again, and so I don't know. So first hand, when you have political and economic crisis, I don't know why this bill, the ATA bill and the Prevention of Terrorism Act, is on the forefront of the government. You should look into first stabilize the country.
And then there's also this additional piece of legislation, I believe, the online safety bill.
Online safety, definitely. So rather than working on this, on trying to get the control of the masses by force, I think if you try to stabilize the country, politically and economically, basically, that will be a start. So that's what we've been working on. Our party had been putting the economic policy from the day we took over the opposition. And we have no problem whoever uses it, because it will only benefit the country. So, you want assurance, we've always given it. And not that we don't take this thing seriously, because we don't rely on this. We don't want the online safety bill to come into power. We don't want the ATA. We disregard the PTA. We don't want to use it. It's prevention against terrorism. When it's turned around and when it's used against your citizens, so then citizens become terrorists. You can't do that. Like you said, when you use it against Vasanthi Pudulige, you don't need to have degree in law, to be highly educated to understand that person coming onto the road and protesting, whether that's a nuisance or not, that should be dealt accordingly. But that is not terrorism. You should draw a line. So I say something today, I can be taken in. So online safety, I take something, I post something. So I don't know what we believe is. This is trying to stop the next Aragale by force. So because when people came onto the roads and there were peaceful protests and there were arrests and they were taken in at night, 10, 9, whatever the time, and magistrates came out and said, no, you have a right to protest, peaceful protest, don't block the roads, don't hinder the public, have your protest. That was permitted. They tried bringing the masses to court, no. Magistrates allowed it. They said, no, you have a constitutional right. We'll uphold it. But you can't stop the general movement of the public, you can't hinder the public. Have your protest. So that is permitted. Not in this country, in every country. But then when you turn down to terrorism, that's a totally different story. How can you use the PTA against all these citizens? So you have to draw a line who is a terrorist and who is not. Not that we are saying total legislation should be thrown. No. Now there is no war, there is no terrorism. We don't know how the future might be. You have to be careful, yes, true. But you have the penal code. You can make it stronger. Like my learned senior said, the Public Securities Act is always there. Emergency regulation is always put into force whenever it is needed. Now, when you take the present ATA bill as well as the Online Safety Act, already the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights on the 18th of October as well as I believe on the 30th of October, they've already put out their positions by the experts and they are saying no, this is not going to work. So what we don't understand is the government saying that they are trying to stabilize this country. The utmost focus this whole year had been on this. So March they want to bring in a bill, now in September 15th I believe they want to bring in a bill. So all right, but what we are saying is there, place your focus, understand what's wrong, stabilize the country, then look at it, because now without stabilizing, you can't expect the people to stay in the houses also. They are going to come out. It's difficult. It's not easy. When you say economic crisis, we have health issues, no medicine, no doctors. We have to go to private pharmacies to buy it. Not everybody can do so.
The bigger issue, rather than no medicine, no doctors, is having fake medicine being given to you by government hospitals.
When you see
by real doctors.
Real doctors. Now when you see the ministers being changed every can, so that means it's not working. So what we believe as the opposition, we don't want to always come in and pull the leg of the government and say no, that's not fine, that's fine. If you are doing it right, we will always support you. It might politically not be favorable to us, but we want the people to understand if it's good, we are always there. But then again, just to show that we are always there, whatever the government says, we are not going to say. We are not going to approve and we are not going to stand by it. So when you take the PTA or the ATA bill, what they want to bring in, and even the ICCPR, we brought it because we are a dualist country, we have to bring it into power. But Section 3 is haphazardly used. People are just taken in and it's actually public humiliation to us. We say we are a Buddhist country. We take a foreigner saying that there is a Dharma Chakra. And the Supreme Court comes out and says the rest is arbitrary and malicious. It's utter humiliation, no? So I don't think you can always turn around and say the police is not educated enough. If they are not, train them. Because people are suffering. They come and haphazardly use all these acts which are put into power and then coming and turning and say, no, it's the police who did it. No, we don't believe so. So now the ATA detention order, the DIG will get it through the ministry secretary. So then isn't the secretary involved?
So the secretary also has to be incompetent and
incompetent. So that I'm not saying that the secretary is competent or not, but I'm saying the government is involved. You can't turn around and distance yourself and say no, it's the police who's messing around, not us. No. If the police is messing around and you know it's not working, do something about it.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Thevang Kartigala. We now move our attention to Attorney at Law Hijaz Hizbullah. Well, you are in a very extraordinary position, I would say, as a man who's been fighting for fundamental rights, who has studied these acts and these pieces of legislation inside out, and then to be on the receiving end and suffer at the hands, of course, of this act, and then to be held to be, completely free from any wrongdoing under those acts. The PTA was used, then it stopped for a while. It started, the assurances were given. It started again with the arrest of Vasantha Mudalige. And I believe yesterday, parliamentarian Shanakin Rasamanikam moved an adjournment debate about some things that happened in the north, where one person was arrested for selling a cake. Another 18-year-old boy was arrested for accompanying his father, who provided a sound system for a certain event that the government was, or the police in the area was not in favor of being held. So with this renewed use of the PTA, do you think that government is trying to normalize the use of this PTA again. How do you think this will stand with the international community coming down so hard on us? Because the EU has on several occasions even threatened to revoke the GSP Plus concession on us, which will make us suffer economically a lot. But government doesn't seem to be quite deterred by that.
Well, Shalan, unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, it's the threats like the GSP Plus that actually does work with the government. And it's unfortunate because the government responds only to those sticks. No amount of public pressure, no amount of people signing on the road, signing petitions that's put out on display on the road, going on protest marches, actually motivates or deters the government to take steps against the PTA. Why? Because these laws are not there for the people. These laws are there to protect governments. So people protesting against the PTA or the ATA does not really hurt or bother the government, or they do not take it seriously, because actually they are doing it for themselves, the people in power. So the only thing that will really work is a GSP Plus. So I think I need to do some research on this, but what I do feel is that somewhere from 2022 onwards, the GSP concessions were being negotiated.
They were on review.
They were on review, and therefore for those purposes the government did backtrack and promise that they will not use the PTA and that they will bring in a new law. Now what I need to do the research in where the timelines and where these negotiations stand, but I think somewhere in May, June, the negotiations reach some level of finality, and certain promises have been made by the EU. And I think the government has now gone back into the comfort zone. And that is why the PTA is making its way back. We also see the ATA. Now the ATA was originally presented, not presented in Parliament, and then it was published in the Gazette in September, but not tabled in Parliament, and so we do not know whether the ATA is going to come or not. But I think it's all to do with what's going on in the EU and the GSP Plus issue, right? So if you ask me, is it because the government wants to normalize the PTA and all of that? I think it's not really that. I think it's a lot to do with what's going on with the GSP Plus negotiations. So I think they have reached some sort of a comfort zone, and they're bringing the PTA back in. So they're ready to use the PTA again.
So, but wouldn't using the PTA means jeopardizing those promises and jeopardizing the continuity of the GSP Plus, because the EU has always been against it?
Well, I feel I feel that maybe they have entered into some understandings, and they have got locked themselves in, and maybe it's the next review is in a year's time. So they have some time. They have a breathing space. So within this breathing space, the government brings in the PTA back in. So I think that's what's happening, right? So and that is problematic. That is problematic as far as citizens of this country are concerned, because are the laws, such draconian laws, going to be dependent on foreign trade negotiations? Right? Shouldn't the government be more receptive to what the people want to say and have to say about these laws? And I think I'm very grateful that for Mr. Javed Yusuf for coming out with that and asking that very important question. Do we need a terrorism law? And that's the most important question we need to ask. I mean, as lawyers, I think we have 4 lawyers here, we will all agree that we can agree on murder, we can agree on theft, we can agree on robbery. What are the elements of robbery? What are the elements of theft? What are the elements of murder? What are the elements of terrorism? Can the 4 of us agree? Nobody can agree. Which is precisely why a law based on terrorism is very problematic. Very problematic. And that is what leads to abuse. Now, like you said, a person accompanying his father giving sound equipment. That's because there is no definition of terrorism. Anything can be made terrorism.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Hijaz Hizbullah. Now we'll of course open the floor for questions from our journalist. We've got with us Niresh Eliathambi. Niresh, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Charlene. So we were talking about the definitions and the difficulty of defining what terrorism is. So I quickly looked up what the Oxford Dictionary says, and it says the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. And if you look at the other dictionaries, you have similar definitions, if not the same. Nowhere does it say anything about selling cakes, Charlene, or using sound equipment. So it's very clear that what happened recently is a clear abuse of the PTA by the police and whatever other authorities. So isn't it very easy, and let me ask Mr. U.R. De Silva, who after all is a very respected guest on our show and an extremely well respected advisor to the Ministry of Justice. Is it not possible to simply order for the Attorney General or the Minister to give an order saying that these arrests are not to be under PTA?
Perfectly right. Because now it was happening last few years, all Poison Opium Dangerous Act, when they arrest a person for drug cases, they put PTA and then thereafter he will be there in remand or detention. So because of that, the Honorable Attorney General called the IG and given specific instruction, if you are dealing with Poison's Opium Act, don't take PTA into your hand. So that's how they have given a special circular. Thereafter they didn't do it. Though they introduced heroin is a different matter, but they have not arrested them under PTA. So because I say, now this is also same. Now, can you remember the Ramses case, FR case, and then Natasha Idrisuria's matter? In all these cases, the court has specifically stated that these people had abused the law. That does not mean we have to abolish the law. I personally feel and I say that we must need some sort of legislation to combat terrorism. That's for sure. Because we can't say that we have penal code and then other laws also there. No, you can't do that. So there should be specific law where it should be defined and then put it into force.
But I think the issue that Attorney at Law Hijaz Hizbullah raised was the fact that you can't really agree on a definition.
No, that in all the countries it is there. So that does not mean we have to abolish the law. So if somebody can, he said that definition is there. It is included in the PTA, ATA paragraphs. It is included. It is not that. But specific. There are other things.
It's wide.
Sorry.
It's wider.
Wider.
But
wider.
Still not including
that
cake.
definition was there, at least to some extent it's acceptable.
I think
But violence for a political aim.
So
Here there is no violence, there is no, the political element is not there in the current ATA.
But I am saying is you can define in that way, but authorities should know, as you said. Now they should know bringing a cake does not come in under PTA, and they should not arrest the person under that. It is very easy for them to do that and say this is terrorism. So that is, of course, it's a different issue. And the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal, everywhere, it has been established that the police are using for their pleasure that not to do it properly. So that does not mean, I personally say that does not mean that we have to abolish that. We have to define it and then carefully draft it and then put. Now, for detention orders, earlier it was not there, now it has come down to 2 months. So when a person is suspicion of terrorism is taken into custody, a detention order should be there to investigate.
But Mr. De Silva, the issue I think at hand right now, I mean, we can sit here and discuss about legal principles and well, legal jargon, of course. But the issue at hand is, for a member of the general public, is that it's not that the PTA is being misused, it's that it's being misused so hilariously, to a point where terrorism is now a joke. Because if a person sees breaking news, such and such a person has been arrested under the PTA, they know for a fact that that person is not a terrorist. Like, for me at least.
How can you say that they know that they is not a
when was the last time, Mr. De Silva, if the PTA is so important, so necessary, when was the last time that a person who actually was a terrorist, or who has actually been convicted of terrorism, being arrested under the PTA? When was the last time?
There are a number of cases.
When
now,
was
while
the last?
talking one or two isolated cases.
Isolated
Because, yes, because if you go to remand and the convicted people are there, the courts have gone into these matters and then they convicted. It was not published. So because of that, we can't say that all people were freed. No, it is not correct. There are instances this law had been abused. I personally agreed on that. But that does not mean the law should not be there to do whatever they want. You can't control a terrorist because they are coming out with various methods. So we have to adjust ourselves, and we don't have eyewitnesses to go ahead. So that is why they want to investigate these matters under detention orders. Now it has been given 2 months. Thereafter, if they want, they can produce him to the magistrate and get an extent if they want. And the magistrate, of course, has the power. Now we all talk, give magistrate the authority. So they have given the magistrate to, if they want to extend, they have to go and then ask for the magistrate. Then magistrate will go through it and see whether it is proper or not. And the lawyer can go into that. And lawyer can visit, and Hijaz Pulla suffered. That is why I say the PTA, that article was not there. The section was not there. Now it is clearly stated that lawyer can visit, and the Human Rights Commission at any time, without informing them, they can go and see whether that person is safely there, and the magistrate should visit. It's a mandatory requirement. And then thereafter, if there is a complaint, the magistrate can change the place as well. So those matters, people are not talking. And we should inform the people, these are the things that are there inside the ATA Act or the bill. So if that is there, if a terrorist or suspicious person has been taken into custody, the authorities should be given, genuinely if they are doing, they should be given opportunity to investigate properly. Otherwise, we can't tolerate that. We can't eradicate the terrorism. That is why I say it is very important. The PTA, of course, we have the experience how the draconian law suffered. But if we are going to change it, then allow them to do that. And then what are the problems you have?
But another issue is now we all agree that the PTA is draconian, the PTA is dangerous, and the PTA is so open to abuse. Now, when it comes to replacing the PTA, we all have two options. One, we could repeal the PTA and discuss amongst ourselves, amongst stakeholders.
We have done that now.
Decide on what the replacement is. Or we can keep the PTA in force and try to find an alternative to it. But the issue really comes in the fact that although the PTA is, everybody agrees that it's bad, it's been misused, it's still being used. Why is it?
It has been not changed or amended.
So, yes, exactly. But if the government gives an assurance that it won't be used to the international community or whoever, and it's still being used while the government is trying to find a replacement, a suitable replacement for it, and it's being used so hilariously to the fact that a person who cracks a joke is arrested. a person who writes something that is obviously
That is under ICCPR, not the PTA.
that was the ICCPR. So there are more pieces of
So that's
legislation.
what I'm telling
We have
you.
so many
you
draconian
mean to say
pieces
that
of
we have to abolish the ICCPR? No.
How would you respond to that, Mr. Hizbullah?
Can you give me the question again?
So the point being, you propose that we don't need the PTA, and Mr. Yuar de Silva is of the opinion that we need anti-terrorism legislation in Sri Lanka because there have been successful cases where terrorists have been convicted where...
So until we bring the amendment, what do we do?
Exactly, in the interim.
Right. So Shalan, you're absolutely correct. Right. So if we have accepted and there is so much of data that PTA is being abused, right? Mr. De Silva spoke about convictions. Very important thing, I think we should be looking at the conviction rate. How many people arrested? How many people in detention?
That's correct.
How many people acquitted? How many people acquitted?
How many people convicted?
How many people convicted? And the most important point is how long were they in detention before acquittal? I was in a ward with PTA detainees, and I'll just share just one story about the small man. 17 years, a man went and dropped his daughter in grade 1 in school, took the bus from Kilinochchi and got off at Vaunia. He went to meet a person and then he was arrested. He went home 17 years later. On the 17th year, at the end of his High Court trial, he gave evidence and he stood on the witness box and he was speaking to the judge. I mean, he was giving evidence to the judge. Halfway through the evidence, he broke down crying when he narrated his story. It was a complete case of mistaken identity. And the judge was stunned to hear this story. And the judge asked him, "Why didn't you tell this before?" And Mr. De Silva and all, since we are all lawyers, we will know. He asked him, "When did I get the chance?" When, as a PTA detainee, when do you actually get the chance of telling the judge, "This is what happened to me"? You never get the chance. So at the end of 17 years, he was acquitted. He went home to give his daughter in marriage. Now those are the statistics we also need. Now to answer your question, Shalan, if we know that this law is being abused, then I think we need to impose a moratorium on it. That's number one. Number two, we need to identify, and that's part of all this data, is identify how this law is being abused. What are the loopholes and how they creep in, right? And then also ask the next question is, do we actually need these laws? Right? And then come up with whatever law that we are coming up. And also in this question about the law is good, the police is violating it, I think that's, and we have, the government says we have made a good law, the police is abusing it. That's not right. The police is part of the law-making process. We saw this in the ATA. Some of the lawyers who appeared did not sign off on the final document. Why? Because they could not agree to it. This was not the draft that they prepared. So it's not a case of the government is good and then some officer down the ranks is violating the law. And also I want to talk about a very good judgment and pay tribute to the Supreme Court, especially Justice Jasantha Kodagoda in Muhammad Ramzi versus Senivaratna, which is an excellent judgment. And these are, I mean, so the pushback from the judiciary, and we should welcome that judgment of Justice Kodagoda on the ICCPR. And I think if this judgment had come slightly before, when I think some of those other famous, the comedians case, Natasha's case.
But I think still there was another arrest.
Yeah, so I think, but this judgment, which I think came out very recently, gives very strong guidelines. This came on the 14th of November, right? It's very strong guidelines as to how the law is and what is freedom of expression, the power of arrest, and also talks about how the law, the process becomes the punishment. And Shalan, about this whole thing about, we are using the word draconian. I think the real issue in Sri Lanka is the double standards. That is why it's hilarious and hurtful also. Is that some people are privileged and the law never applies to them, but the law applies in full force for some others. And that's the real problem that we have. If the law applies across the board for everybody equally, then I think there is some degree of the
some consolation.
Some consolation. It's not such an unkind cut. But here it's very hurtful when somebody, for example, we had Janasara Thero, every Wednesday there'll be press briefing. He'll be there slandering Islam, smashing the Muslims. And that will be prime time on all the channels. I don't think Sirasa carried it, but I think some of the other channels carried it. Prime time, every day. It's every Wednesday the press briefing is given full coverage. And so much of Facebook hate and all that. But here we had Ramzi writing one Facebook post, and a very important fact that the Supreme Court unearths in this judgment is that the arrest complaint came from the Ministry of Defence. Why is the Ministry of Defence getting involved in these things?
Now,
and sending a complaint to the CID. So
Mr.
these are the things that we need to look at.
Mr. De Silva, now there appears to be this dichotomy where there's the government and the police. But in actual fact, the reality is that the government controls the police. An IGP has gone on record as saying that what is it, Shalan? 85 or 90% of OICs were politically appointed.
Former IGP.
And that means not politically appointed by the opposition, it's politically appointed by the ruling party. So the government, whichever ruling party it is, clearly controls the police. And therefore, the government can very clearly give the instructions as to the way the laws
they are not doing. That's what we say. The government should have the control. Otherwise, merely because the law is there, that does not mean we can get the benefit. They should, otherwise, they should come forward and say, don't do these things. And Supreme Court has decided. Now, in this particular judgment, Supreme Court has given instruction. You have done a wrong thing. You should be punished for that purpose. And then the other matters also, in number of cases, under normal law also, the Chief Justices have given specific instruction to the authorities that they have violated fundamental right. So that is there. But fact remains the police are not doing, and then the politicians are involved and they want to have it in their way. That is how it goes. Now, it is very easy to say, when we come over, we will do this and that. They have been doing it now. So, this is not the first time. So, from 1979, PTA Act was there. Nobody interested in polishing that or change it. But the UN, when they went to UN conference, they gave an assurance. 2015, they came and then started drafting Anti-Terrorism Act. And till 2019, they were doing it. They are not serious about it. Then only this Anti-Terrorism Act came into operation. That does not mean that suddenly they prepared it and put forward. If they want to go to Geneva, they have to have some sort of solution. So my personal view is that if you go, we are looking only first two paragraphs. But if you go into that, the magistrate has the power to, as he said, the person who has been in detention or arrested can explain what that could happen. The magistrate is there now. So earlier it was not there. And bail also being considered in this particular matter. The ATA, it has been considered. Only thing is whether that is also can be misused. It will do it. The police will do it. That's for sure. Because Supreme Court says.
Mr. De Silva, is there any possibility? I'm just trying to pick your brain on this matter. Is there any possibility for any sort of because usually people respond to repercussions. If there is an action, there is a reaction, and if there is some consequence to the actions of police officers or whoever officers are entrusted with using this very powerful piece of legislation, that could also be used as a deterrent. The issue being that people are being arrested for completely unrelated reasons that are unrelated to terrorism. And even, I believe, in Ramzi Raziq's matter, the police officers who were involved in his arrest were only ordered to pay 30,000 rupees. And I don't think that's even minimum wage in Sri Lanka, or at least a person below the poverty line. So would a measure on the part of the government, at least, to maybe suspend these police officers who are using it wrongly, or to demote them, to take some positive action to show good faith on the part of the government, do you think that would at least go some way?
That certainly should be. But how are they going to do it? Because they are thinking that he will help for me to go to election and get the election results clear, because they are helping. So that is why they are not taking any action. Though the Supreme Court has stated and given a lot of guidelines, they are not going to adhere to.
When you say they, who do you mean? Police?
Politicians, the authorities and the government. Totally, if you consider it in total way, the government is not going to take serious action against those police officers. That is the main issue.
In fact, Shalan, there have been instances, perhaps not recently, where police officers convicted of FR violations have then been promoted. But let me ask Mr.
So I think the government should look into that. Simply saying that police officers are not taking, now Supreme Court FR is not a penal method. What they want is compensation. So like you say, what you brought in was a very good amendment. If you can bring in penal amendments against police officers who act in this way, then there is no way that politicians can take use of them. Because the very second they do something and they get convicted FR, there is no way that they can come and put their hands in and intervene in FR matter. That's going to proceed, whether you like it or not. Whether the department is involved with the politician or not, I will not go that far, but although the FR matter will go for. So if you can bring in that, what you are saying is superb. But then when you go and say that there is involvement, that is very serious. So that is why these acts should not prevail. So the Patriot Act in US came only in 2001, when they had the issue. Ours came in 79 when we had the issue. So we are said to have won the war in 2009. And now we are still arguing on terrorism and rights, so there is the bombing. I don't know whether we identified the terrorists. The former HE and police officers were found to be at fault in the FR. The High Court matters are still going on. So those are also, as far as I know, I don't know whether how the proceedings will go on. I don't want to touch on that. But as far as I know, there is not a single person who identified a terrorist under the PTA who's there. But we had the Easter bombings. We had full investigations. So what is the point of the act? Just because you detain a person, so that's why you have remand custody also. Maybe they get involved and all that. So at that time also, you still have the police coming, taking them for investigations, and all that is happening. Just because their detention kept in a corner place, or whether you are put into remand custody in an open prison, that's a different story. So that doesn't separate how a person might react to whether he'll give the information or not. Now, actual detention orders, but then that's why you say you should stop torture. Because that's where it comes in. You are kept in detention, then you don't get the information, then comes in torture and like that, then you have the use of power and all that. Now, when you make allegations, the politician involved, then it has to be stopped definitely. Before bringing in the act, you have to bring in procedure and guidelines, or even laws, acts, to distance the politicos from the police if they are giving instructions over the phone. So if the police are also that dumbfounded, if I may say, now like you said, arresting for cakes and all this, that. So what is the use of the police? Police is there to protect the people. Law is there to protect the people. The law is turned around. People are arrested saying that they are terrorists. So the law is not helping the people. The police is not helping the people. The government is saying, right, I don't know, the police is doing all this, we don't know what to do. So then I don't know who knows what's happening in the country. Because it's not safe. If laws are to protect, the police have to be trained. You can't bring in laws and then turn around and say, no, it's the police. Then halfway through say, yeah, maybe politicians are also involved. No. You have to bring strict laws with a view. You can't bring in laws to just see how it goes. Because you take in the person into detention and all that, the magistrate has a duty to come and see, true. But after that person dies in detention, what's the point of coming and seeing the body?
So Tivanka, if there is a change in the ruling party with the elections next
Yes.
year, how soon could we expect
As soon
this
as
to be
possible,
changed?
because we do.
Oh, that sounds very ambiguous.
No, because
Can we
I can't give you a
Yeah,
deadline.
Because how soon would you like to see it? Within
Like to
1
see
month?
this, so this is a
or-
temporary provision.
Yeah.
We have to sign to bring it into power for year by year. We won't sign it. That's all. When we have to sign it, we won't sign it. Because we don't need the PTA to put down the opposition. Bar Association sends a letter in 2022 saying protesters are arrested under PTA to the government to stop it. The Bar Association. We all are members of that. They say that. They say the executive has a unfettered power there. This is draconian law. Don't arrest people under this. Who are those protesters? They are citizens. They are not terrorists. Can't the police identify that? Can't the government instruct the police? They can instruct on everything. They can send complaints. But they can't instruct, no, don't arrest. I don't know, that's the police. So if the police is misbehaving and taking the law to their hands, the government should know to take control and bring in laws. If the politicos are misbehaving, the government also has to know to control that and bring them before the court. Because this is not a joke. Now, like my Honorable Hijaz said, 17 years is not a joke for person's life. It's quite easy to come and say, you know, right, we investigated, now it's admitted. Like he said, the most important fact is, we have to see how long they were in detention, how long investigations carried on. So, investigations must carry on very fast, especially when a person is in detention. Because it's their life we are talking about. So, turning around and you can play the blame card. Opposition, government, police and all. But at the end of the day, at this point of the time, all this time we've been talking about all these cases, we know who were arrested, were those terrorists. So this is the PTA.
And the self-confessed terrorists are in cabinet.
You have to understand, when you bring in laws,
That's
you
the
have to be extremely
effectiveness
careful.
of the PTA. And that's the whole double standard concept.
Now that's when you say, when you have foreign countries using, that's the thing with the Patriot. It came up when they had an issue. But they don't do now, when the capital was overrun during Trump's time, they didn't use the Patriot Act. And Pudu people on Guantanamo and all, you know. There is a limit where you use the law. So, terrorism, I understand it cannot be defined, that is an accepted norm. But then again, when you say prevention of terrorism, and when you start arresting people on the road, and if the police officer don't have the basic sense to understand that, what is the ministry doing? What is the government doing? You can't turn around and say, what were they doing in 2015? They were in the 2015, the counter-terrorism bill was brought. The counter-terrorism bill was brought.
Right.
That was there in 2015. That was quite a big uproar by the public. Now it's the same president, Prime Minister, President, same person. So what we believe is the ATA.
Who was there in the cabinet? What were they doing? It is
So,
very easy
now
to
the ball is
criticize. And when we come over, we will do everything. We will show everything to the country. But it is not correct. All these politicians are responsible. When they are in power, they just keep passing that. And they go over there to the Geneva and say, we will definitely do. As my letter friend said, that they assured and they came and thereafter they prepared a draft. Who are there? It's so-called SGB. Only one person is now there as the president.
So I think the question there, Mr. De Silva, is now the SJB, formerly the majority faction of the
Fine, and then
UNP,
now they are thinking-
UNP now the SJB is saying we don't need any anti-terrorism legislation, including the PTA. But in 2015, the notion was, no, we need anti-terrorism legislation, just not the PTA. So has that changed?
Yeah, quite truly, because
It has changed.
what we have to understand is there is quite a difference in the two parties.
With the UMP and the SJB?
Yeah, because it's easy to say it's the same faction, but to understand, the top in the UMP is still there. The main stakeholders have not crossed over to the SJB except for the deputy leader who had no power at that time. Who are not given power. You are not given power, you are not given prominence, you are not given a chance. You can say yes, he was allowed to run for the election the last moment with a month. where Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa was running for over a month at that time, his whole campaign. That is why the party came out. So if you see the faction who has come out, you know they are the small crowd and a few top of ministers, but those were not the people who were taking the decisions. People who are taking the decisions are still there in UMP. They are still fighting for government within the two political parties. That is not our problem. So when you can easily turn around and say, what were our ministries? We have the opposite, what were our ministries? Were we in so much of power? No. So quite simply, and even at that time, the present president couldn't hold his position. There was the 52-day government, it was a tussle for power. Nobody cared about this. But even during that time, the counter-terrorism bill came about. Now this is coming about, but at that time, what you should understand is the country was stable. You had time to focus on this, on separating. That's not what you are saying. It's all right, you trying to, if you want to remove this, we'll agree. But there's a time to focus on everything. Now from March to September, and you keep on going on this. What have you done to stabilize the rest?
Now, Tivanka, you brought up an interesting point, the 52-day government.
Yes.
Then I looked once again at the definition of terrorism, and we all saw what happened in Parliament with chairs being thrown at the speaker.
Spices.
And various, yes, the free advertising campaign for spices, yes, but when you go back to the definition, the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. So, why were none of them arrested under PTA?
Quite true.
Just because they are parliamentarians and they did it in Parliament, nothing happens. So, the PTA clearly is wrongly used, and it therefore becomes a bad law if it is used only mainly for these wrong purposes.
Just thinking out loud, if you use that definition, even at this moment, then the government becomes terrorist. The second you use this act to subjugate the opposition, that means it's against the political will, the government becomes terrorist, according to that same definition.
Well, in that case, if the government can be defined as terrorists, then then the PTA certainly has a lot of problems. So
I'd like to pose one question to Attorney Lord Javed Yusuf. Now we keep on, focusing our attention on the executive. The executive is wrong for using these powers that have been vested with them, but Parliament also has, of course, a duty, because the larger representation of the general public is seen in Parliament. Because if you take a president, 51% of people would vote for one person, 49% would vote for someone else. But in Parliament, you get true representation of the people. More people are represented in Parliament. So there are checks and balances that have been put, even speaking on the responsibility of the police department and the control of the police department by our elected representatives. That too is maintained in Parliament through the Constitutional Council. Now, with the unfolding or the incidents that took place recently, and the delay in appointing of a new IGP, still there is no permanent IGP, it's only an acting IGP position. Do you think there's something wrong with the process that Parliament is being used as a check and balance on the executive, or is it just, again, abuse?
No, I think the simple position is that after President Gotabaya Rajapaksa abdicated his office and the new president came in, the new president had to deal with economic issues basically. The country has gone bankrupt and he had to deal with that. Now, in the process of dealing with all that, these other issues, he is unable to move. Now, you can see that when you don't appoint, you keep giving extensions to the incumbent IGP without appointing somebody to fill the vacancy. It's there is a reason. You are unable to take that next step. And now finally, when the next step was taken also, the IGP has been appointed only as acting IGP. And now I saw in the paper, I don't know if the cabinet has finally decided, that they are going to bring a restriction that any IGP will be there for only for 3 years. So it shows that the government is dysfunctional, governance is dysfunctional. So that is why this whole position is. I personally believe now is the time for elections. You have to get a new mandate. That only can empower government, energize government, because you have to present a program to the people and then get a mandate and then go ahead. But now what has happened is, it is not clear, because the SLPP says the president is there to implement our policies. Of course, president doesn't say anything, he does his own thing, so that's fine. But the point is, for the country to move forward, you have to have elections and test the people. And you can't take policy measures without consulting the people. No, that's democracy. That's why you have to present a manifesto and get a mandate. But just leaving that alone for the moment, I want to refer to what he just said about that guy for 17 years. Now that is a clear example of the injustice that this whole system of these draconian laws results on the citizen who is supposed to be sovereign. Now take 17 years of any person's life that is lost. He's married, no? That guy.
Yes, he married, he had a child.
So 17 years, the child did not have a father. Who is accountable for this? And it is not enough to say the law is good, but it is the police who are bad. Well, if the police are bad, the buck stops with the person who is in charge of the police or the authorities. Can a minister come and say, it is we had a good policy, but the official has blundered or not done what is necessary.
That's the argument that's being made, though.
Yeah, if that happens, the minister, if he doesn't take action, I think the Supreme Court, he just said, Justice Kodagoda has given that judgment. Like that, the courts will give judgment. Now, even in the case
against the former president,
the case about who is responsible for the economic crisis, the court in its judgment has said, because there are arguments that it was the previous government which created the crisis and so on. The court has clearly said, at the time you took over, you knew what the situation was. So you are responsible to correct it, right? So now the police, if they are misusing, then it's up to the authorities to correct them, train them. It is like giving a gun to somebody and then who's untrained how to use it, he shoots somebody and say, well, he misused it. That is not the point. But leaving all that alone, I come back to the same argument that terrorism has to be dealt with. There is no two words about that. But terrorism is really a way of advancing particular causes. That's where about political objective.
That
right?
particular definition, yes.
There are various ways you can advance political cause. You can negotiate, you can demand, you can canvass, you write petitions and so on. But the extreme one is where you use violence, it becomes terrorism. But the best way to do away with terrorism or not let the conditions for terrorism to exist is to have a contented people. You address them, and if a government is shown to be a caring government, even if they are unable to deliver because of other circumstances, people won't be resentful. You should not create resentment in the mind. A contented people who know that they have a caring government will never be pushed to terrorism. Terrorism arises when interested mischief makers go and exploit a suitable condition. So there are various ways. We should not have this phobia. Now next year there might be a terrorist attack, so they must have this act. So because basically, and the other point is, Constitution has laid down various guidelines about fundamental rights, directives of state policy and all. That is the duty of the state and the government to implement it. In some situation some mistake is made or an excess is committed, then the courts will adjudicate and grant justice. But the courts are there to adjudicate. You can't say, no, let the injustices be committed, the courts will do the needful. That is not what the courts are there for. Courts will do justice, that is their duty, and that is how it should be. But it's a duty of the state, incumbent on the state, to fulfill all the obligations that are placed in the Constitution for the state. Now, for instance, directives of state policy are not justiciable. You cannot enforce it. But that gives the line or the guidance for government to act.
The fundamental principles.
The government's actions must be informed by those policies. So, to cut a long story short, my view is terrorism, you don't need this act. You don't need terrorist act. But if you look after the people, by and large, people will be happy, even if they are suffering.
Human rights, rule of law, democracy.
And justice.
Yeah. Independence of the judiciary. If you focus on those four, I think you've got it right.
Ijaz, what's the role of the Attorney General here? We've been talking about police being controlled by politicians and corrupt politicians and governments terrorizing the people, and of course the courts. But what about the Attorney General? Is the AG's department so weak that it can't stand up and enforce what they know about the law? And they are, after all, lawyers, members of the Bar Association.
I think the role of the Attorney General has become very problematic. It has become problematic particularly since the department lost its independence. I was in the Attorney General's department, I'm a former member of the Attorney General's department, and I would say I was I saw the beginning of the end of it losing its independence. We were officers who would handle files, and we would get calls from politicians, and we would completely reject those and say no to them to their faces and do what we thought was right. But I don't know whether that happens now. Now, how is it problematic? Number one, police officer, the Attorney General's department is the lawyer of the police department.
Counsel to the state.
Counsel to the state. So they represent police officers in court, in prosecutions. So the CID is represented by by a state counsel. That same CID officer makes a wrongful arrest. It's the same Attorney General, that state counsel, who will go and
prosecute.
Who will also defend his the fundamental rights application. It's the same Attorney General, if that particular officer has committed torture and needs to be prosecuted, or the question of whether he needs to be prosecuted will also be decided by the same group of Attorney General's department officials. It's those same Attorney General's department officials who will also advise the government on law reform, who will also give opinions on bills, who will also appear before the Supreme Court on fundamental rights applications, on special determinations with regard to bills. So it's this same group of people who play all these roles. They're supposed to prosecute on behalf of the public, defend police officers, advise the government, advise the policy of advise on government policy, and also defend that policy. There's too much happening there. And there is a serious inability for those officers and the Attorney General to be truly independent of the government and the government officials. And that's a serious problem that needs to be examined. I think there needs to be some sort of reform where the prosecutorial arm has to be taken out. So there has to be a group of lawyers who advise the government, who defend the government, but there must be another group of lawyers who prosecute, so that they make their decisions on their own.
An independent prosecutor's office.
Independent prosecutor's office.
DPP.
Now we've heard this this term.
But one small thing, I'm also former prosecutor of State Council Department. Now the thing is, when you take matters like such as the PTA, it's so large, and there is no way that you have all the information. Either the AG has to be empowered. If you make an arrest under the PTA, you have to send it to the attention. Then the AG is aware. Now, when you start to point the finger and always say, no, what is the AG doing? The thing is, now like you said, the cake, I did not know about it. So I could have been officer of the attorney, I could have been the attorney himself and not known about it. So the thing is, you have to empower in a way before you like point the finger. That's why, because I was also there. It's easy to say, but it's so difficult. And the other thing is, you have such a less crowd. So the mass, the inflow of files, the cases advice, that's what I'm saying. So I did a matter where under the penal code there is inciting against the government. This is Ananda Palita, who's a...
Section 120.
Exactly, 120, inciting against the government. It's none other than Ananda Palita, one of prominent trade union chairpersons. When he said the fuel crisis will come, arrested, put 1 week, stagnant, it hits. Now what happens? Now the police can't come and say anything. Because why? Yes, there is a crisis. They can't even come to court. They keep on putting further reports. After a few months, they say, no, we are sending the file to the department. But now you have to wash your hands. Now you came and arrested him.
And then it stacks at the department for about 4 years.
Now it's stacked. After about 1 year,
AG said by.
after about 1 year, AG says no. There is no evidence. There is no incitement because there are certain ingredients. So, by and large, the decision is we abide by it. And it's true, it's a fair decision. It did take time. But then again, there should be some sort of, a process. Then again, if AG is to be involved, either put into every court or whatever, or special unit or whatever, and then have these matters reported.
So if a man can be arrested for foretelling the future, rightly or wrongly, then all the astrologers in the country should be arrested.
And also on this Attorney General's issue, I want to make another point is that now, whilst they play all these multiple roles, their promotions are also decided by the government. And it's not a secret that the seniors officers of the Attorney General's department are looking for appointments in the higher judiciary. They're looking for appointments in the higher judiciary, and those appointments are to be made on recommendations of the government to the Constitutional Council.
That sounds like corruption.
So they need to be. So they need to be in. Have to be holding certain types of views, taking certain prosecutorial decisions, and to be of a particular leaning. If you are to get those recommendations and get your name on that list. Now we had the question of the IGPs. There's only one name being sent for the Constitutional Council to approve. Now
over and over again.
Over and over again. Now if you want to be that only one name in that, then you have to have a certain issue, certain position that you take on important matters. These are the problems with the Attorney General's department, and that is also the problem with the police department.
The larger issue of the AG, Attorney General's department also is linked to this whole institutional decay that we have seen in the last possibly 3 decades or so, where the AG's department, the police and so on, their sense of working and independence is affected. Now it's not only the officials in the department of the police or the AG's department, but it also relates to the politicians. How they are prepared to accept, it's very unfortunate. Now, earlier, I'm not sure when this changed, maybe after 78, there was a time when the Attorney General whose advice the government would seek. If a minister wanted, he goes to the Attorney General's office. The AG doesn't go to the minister's office. That was the level of independence that the AG had. And if the AG gave a particular verdict, the minister may have been advised, minister would have been unhappy, but still he would accept because that was the environment. But now, even any official who is inclined to do so will be reluctant. As he just said, they have to maneuver themselves into certain positions. But of course, there are still some people who will say, okay, I'm not going to do all this, I'm leaving and so on. So that brings us to that large issue. And of course, I think time has come now definitely to reinstall the Director of Public Prosecution. It was there earlier under the Administration of Justice Act. Director of Public Prosecutions was there. We need to have that because it will resolve many of the problems that we are having with regard to the administration of justice.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Javed Yusuf. We have to start our closing statements because time is running short. I'd like to start off with Attorney at Law Hijaz Hizbullah. We spoke a lot about the PTA. We spoke a lot about the ICCPR and, of course, the implementations of these laws, the fallbacks of them, the loopholes that we have to try and work through. Your position has constantly been that Sri Lanka does not need an anti-terrorism law. We don't need special laws to run throughout the period because we have, of course, the Public Securities Ordinance and measures like that during the time of an emergency. My final question to you, if you can address maybe in your closing statement, is do you really think that the PTA will be out soon, or at least, let's say, during your lifetime?
I doubt it. I doubt it for the simple reason. Well, I hope so. I hope so, but I'm skeptical. And I say this, and that's a question you posed, my friend here, Mr. Artigala. And I think it's an unfair question also to say how long will it take, how soon is it? and his answer is obvious, it's not easy. Because Sri Lanka is a society that has had a 30-year war. The politics of divide, of racism, of fear-mongering is not over. I mean, if you see certain things appearing in the media, people will ask, when is the election? When you start people targeting minorities and start saying things about Muslims and Tamils and all of that, people ask, when is the next election?
It's so obvious.
It's so obvious. When is the next? Something is coming up. So we need to work on those things. We as a country need to overcome those challenges. And when we overcome those challenges, we will maybe be scared of the other less. And maybe really see each other for whom we are, right? And also, as Mr. Javed Yusuf said, focus on a content society in the sense, and for me, as what I identify, independence of the judiciary, democracy, rule of law, and human rights. Focus on these things, and I think we will come to a situation where there is no need for a law on terrorism. And then maybe once we come to that, maybe there will be a time when we won't have the PTA. And also on this public security ordinance issue, we do not have to worry about the public security ordinance and parliamentary supervision. For the simple reason is that if the threat is real and genuine and serious enough, you will get parliamentary support. So you don't have to, that's a normal argument that people throw. If the threat is real and serious and genuine, the Supreme Court will also uphold those positions if those laws are challenged. So do not worry about that. You don't need to have a permanent legislation for that. So to answer your question, Shalan, if I think that if this law will disappear, I hope so, but I remain skeptical because I do not see any project as a nation, as a country, that gets us to a point where we see each other beyond our ethnic identities and language and issues like that. Once we do that, then the law will disappear. And I must say, these type of talk shows and the work that you're doing is excellent, because you are and we have been talking about the ATA and all these laws and all these issues, and the media needs to play that role. Media supervision is also important, and I say this because we also have channels that survive on fear mongering. We need to overcome all that, and once we do that, then certainly we'll come to a situation where there will be no PTA.
There will be no need for a PTA.
There will be no need for a PTA. I'll be very frank, right? I go and talk against the PTA or talk against these arrests and all that. A few days later, there'll be posts on Facebook and all that. Oh, terrorists is here, Tattavadaya, meata tiyena prashnayak and all. But well, that's not going to stop us.
But you've already been accused of it and acquitted.
Yeah, but that's the reality in that we live in. But that's we need to come to a point where people will not we will not be looking at it like that.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Hijaz Hizbullah. I now move my attention to Attorney at Law Thivank Hartigala, Assistant Legal Secretary of the Samagi Jana Balavegi and also the organizer for Kalavana. Your closing statement on today's discussion.
So, quite simply, like it was put to me directly, what our position would be is, it's quite direct. We don't need these acts. We don't want to come into power by force and then put the people down to keep their mouth shut and to remain in power. That's not going to work. That has not worked anywhere in the world. That's not going to work with us, and that's not us. We ask for fair elections. I quite agree with my learned senior Mr. Javid when he said, let's get the people's mandate, because that is what we've been striving for from the time this turmoil came up. Let's ask the people. Let's ask the people. So it's not that we are sure that we will win. Because that's usually that's the usual time. When it's good for you, you want elections. When it's bad for you, you don't want. We don't mind. We might not. Somebody else might. That's not a problem. But go for elections. Give the people what they want. So let's come back to the PTA, ATA, ICCPR, and even online safety. But our personal view is that this is a kind of a long stage plan. If things come up, if elections are not held, to ensure that there is no Aragale. We have the ATA empowering the police, the military, securing the government, subjugating the people, putting them in detention. They will be full on the roads, they dragged along and put somewhere. We have the online safety bill, stopping all social media, nothing, no information is passed. I'm not talking about memes and not these kind of things of this Thastava and all those dirty jokes and all that. But there's certain amount of information that is that goes up and down.
But that act has not been enacted yet.
I'm not so. Not even the ATA.
Yes.
This is a long-term view. You know, when you want to stay in power, you identify the problems. Then you have to look into the problems. With so you still have the fertilizer problem, the agriculture problem, and all that, and you want to have an online safety bill. For what? Where the UN had said when during the protests, that when social media was blocked, that itself is a breach of freedom of speech of the people. That itself is violation. So now a bill is brought in. Pursuant to that, where the government can control. This is controlling the people, knowing very well what the future lies. It's not good. So at least by force, to hold it, to keep it in your arms as long as you can. So that's why. That's our belief. That's why all these acts are given prominence apart from all others and given a strong push and just been then kept quiet. No, once in a while they come back, to try to put a small bill and see, and like my friend Hijaz said, the bill comes but not to Parliament. So what is the process? It comes under the table. Shalan, here, you take this and you do it. But you can't go like that. No, you want to have open forum. Well, let's talk, let's debate, and also we are all members of the bar. The bar association, even I think recently has said withdraw the bill, the ATA bill. They made out a statement. So to 2022 they said the PTA was wrong. Now in 23 they say ATA no, don't withdraw the bill. So I think we are members, we stand by that. They take a decision on behalf of the membership. So that itself speaks out loud. Our answer is right there.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Thivank Hartigala, Deputy Legal Secretary of the SJB and organizer of Kalavana. We now move our attention to Attorney at Law Javid Yusuf, former member of the Constitutional Council.
Yeah, finally, by way of final remarks, I want to reiterate that I don't believe that there is a need for a Prevention of Terrorism Act. But also, I want to say that the Prevention of Terrorism Act is so draconian that it is a low bar to be compared with. Now, when you say that the ATA has removed the power to convict on confessions and periods of detention, you are comparing with the PTA. And the PTA is a very low bar. So you should not compare it with the PTA really. That is one. The second thing is, I see this repeatedly when a law is being brought, not only these laws, any other laws, ministers and government officials saying, you can go to the Supreme Court. Finally, you can go to the Supreme Court and get a determination. Now, the Supreme Court doesn't decide whether the law is good or bad in the sense of whether the country needs it or not. It only determines the constitutionality of it. It looks at only that narrow aspect. It is not required to look at the larger this thing. So, if when you are discussing a law or the lead up to the law, you have to discuss whether it's beneficial to the country or not. So, if you want to impose VAT, you have to discuss whether it's important or not. If you want to give tax holidays, whether it's important or not. No point saying you can go to the Supreme Court and you can canvass it. You will only canvass the constitution. So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Javed Yusuf, former member of the Constitutional Council. We of course come to President's Counsel UR De Silva, of course fighting a lone man's game. Nothing new to you, of course, given your performances in court. So President's Counsel UR De Silva, you held a drastically different opinion from all the other panelists present here today. So you get some extra time for your closing statement. Your time starts now.
Charlotte, now it's very easy to criticize once the bill is there, but if they are not coming out, how to improve it? Or you can say abolish that. It's very easy to say. Now, Opium Dangerous Act, how many people are languishing in remand without any cause? They have been introduced by the heroin by the police, and they are being kept for years. Now, as a criminal practitioner, I have all the experience how in a normal murder case, the people take into custody and they have been there, languishing in remand. AG's advice, how long they have been there. So they are not talking about the 17-year person. I say it's wrong, but there are in other cases also under normal law, under Opium Dangerous Act, ultimate result would be they will be acquitted by the Court of Appeal, but nobody is helping them. And then in the Supreme Court, they have given guidelines, and in various cases they have stated that police should have taken instructions from the Attorney General's Department. They have not done it. So what are we going to do? Are we going to abolish those laws? Are we going to, because the police are introducing heroin to the people, that is why we don't want Poisonous Opium Dangerous Act? No, we can't do that. In a country like this, there should be some sort of law to curtail or to eradicate the terrorism. So there may be lacunas, there may be things that should be developed. But if we are not going to help them, so I personally of the view that the confessions are removed, it's a good thing. And my learned friend said, you can't compare. We have to compare it, because if we are going to abolish everything, and as my learned friend said, no, we don't want any law. People can do whatever they want. No, you can't do that. In a country, in a Sri Lankan culture, politicians are involved and people are going behind them. They are talking about election. You mean to say that after the election all things will be okay and we are happy? No, it's the same thing. we are going to the same pattern. The people who are coming to power will bring more and more laws into the parliament.
Draconian laws.
Draconian or some.
So people in Sri Lanka have no hope.
No hope because of this politician situation. Because now we are going to have this election in the same way. They are talking about election, but they are not talking to change the system. If we are going to PR system, the same people with different attire will come over there. So what is the difference? The people will forget everything and go behind them when the elections are there. This is Sri Lankan culture. So this type of a culture, you need to have some sort of law. But if we are not going to change our attitudes, and as my friend said, if we are not going to work together, then we are going to go haywire.
So, but just one question, if I may interrupt you, President's Counsel Yuar De Silva. Now, Mr. Hizbullah, in his closing remarks, said that he believes that there will be a time when there is no need for the PTA. Do you think that there could be a time like that in the future where there is no need?
No, I don't think that is there. They should be there because there should be some sort of terrorism law to curtail terrorism, because we don't know at what time it will come out. In other countries also, they have happily introduced laws with regard to terrorism. Now they are turned around and say, like my learned friend, they abolish these things. How can they say like that? They are there. Now New Zealand take into consideration. Now they said that this is our country, nothing had happened and nothing will happen. But ultimately what happened? They have introduced a draconian terrorism law. We are not talking about that. They have not, there are no definition with regard to terrorism.
But I think the difference there, Mr. De Silva, is the fact that they don't use it in the way that Sri Lankan police use it.
I am coming to that point. They are not using that to torture people or to have to arrest them unnecessarily.
But we are.
Here it's different. That is why I say we have to change our attitudes. Politicians should not interfere. As they said, the Attorney General's department should be given different powers. Because we give all the powers to them. They say advice, we can't give evidence, advice when you want, it will take years. So what will happen? People are languishing remand. So because of that, if you think that ATA is not necessary, it's wrong. We need that type of thing, but it should not be a draconian. And now when you go through it properly, it's like murder case where a person can be remanded only 1 year. Here also same. And 2 months retention order. Magistrate had been given all the power to go into that. So those are the fundamental things that are necessary. So that is why I say this has considered the people's view, but when they are going to implement it, we don't know what will happen because of the police are not doing it properly. Though the Supreme Court and the other courts have been given necessary guidelines. So what I'm saying is, we can't just say abolish this, but if we are going to have it in proper way, this should be there to safeguard our security.
Thank you very much, President's Counsel Yuar De Silva. Thank you very much to all our other guests present here today. Thank you very much, Niresh, for joining us on our program and asking all the right questions. And thank you very much to all our viewers out there. Of course, as much as we discuss these matters on programs, one might think that what's the point of all of these discussions? Nothing's going to change. But whoever thought that a sitting president in Sri Lanka would be ousted by the power of the people? Whoever thought that Sri Lankans would feel so empowered and so free that they would come out on the streets one day and ask a sitting executive president of Sri Lanka to leave? That is a clear definition or a clear instance where the power of the people was proved to be greater than the people in power. And the people will get that power again next year come the elections, and it's up to you to decide and to vote wisely, and your vote will decide if Sri Lanka will come out of this crisis or not. Thank you very much for tuning in. Take care and God bless.